So a 40th birthday and a very good poll. Not a bad weekend to finish a bizarre week, really, in which scandal was the main focus. Jacinda Arden's with us. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
How'd you go last night?
Oh, just birthday-wise, are you referring?
Yeah, or anything else you want to tell us about?
It was very quiet, actually. I mostly spent the day with Clark and Neve, which was really lovely.
Good stuff.
And then I read some cabinet papers.
Good. Do you believe the poll?
Oh, look, do you know, Mike, if you look back on any poll, you'll see me making similar comments, whether they're good, bad, indifferent. I always keep a healthy scepticism around polls. I'd like to feel like the general direction of them, the trend of them, though, is speaks to a general confidence in the public around the government's response to COVID-19 and our recovery plan.
Any correlation with what you're seeing internally from polling?
Oh, look, I would say a correlation in terms of, yes, there is a gap between Labor and National, but what I'd say is regardless of what polls are, and a fairly significant one, but what I would say about any of these polls, we will never be complacent. A lot can change very quickly. We know that we have to continue every day to earn the support of New Zealanders.
Right. Lees Galloway, is there any more coming on him, like spending in Paris or Geneva or anywhere else?
Oh, look, and actually I addressed some of these questions in that press conference where I announced my decision, that there were a range of issues that led me to make that decision, that although a number of allegations have been raised, and of course I put a number of questions to the Minister, whilst he's given me the assurance that no money was spent inappropriately, we've undertaken to have ministerial services look into that to just reassure ourselves of that. But regardless, part of the reason I made the decision I did was that he had left himself open to that accusation.
When will we know whether he's been misspending money?
Well, there's no suggestion of that from what I've seen, but I understand that work is already underway. I don't imagine it will take too long, Mike.
Do you have any reassurance around the flight to Antarctica that Peters and his mates were involved in?
Well, this is actually the process for who travels to Antarctica. Vast majority, of course, are those you would expect, those who are part of the science program. There's a portion who go for other reasons. Antarctica and New Zealand have long had a program where artists and creatives and others, and so there is a more discretionary cohort. I understand that the board has established a bit of criteria or a protocol on how that's determined. I think what we need to do in the future is apply that more generally. So even if we have, Ministers of Foreign Affairs have always had at their discretion the ability to make suggestions over who may go, I think we should use that board criteria across the board. I think it would just give us a bit more consistency. In terms of these, and because of that, there's nothing really to say that anyone who goes is wrong or right, and so that's why I think we should use that criteria.
Did Peters overreach?
Oh, well, he certainly had a plan in mind around why he was making this suggestion.
Do you believe that?
Oh, look, there's cabinet papers that demonstrate that this is a plan that the Minister of Foreign Affairs has supported for some time. So Scott Bass is up for significant redevelopment. He's been trying to encourage Antarctica, New Zealand to seek additional supplementary philanthropic funding to support what will be a significant contribution from the Crown.
What was the $100 million for Southland? What would you have spent it on if you were allowed to spend it and Peters didn't block you?
Yeah, a good question. It's certainly never going to be, it's not seen as a way of directly and in and of itself replacing the contribution of the smelter. My visit down there recently suggests to me that what the community is seeking at the moment, by and large, is more time, and I know that Tiwai are in negotiations with Meridian over that. But once we know what the timetable is, there is going to need to be a lot of support for Great South, the Economic Development Agency, to continue with some of their ambition over the kinds of industry that will replace the smelter. Now, that funding would essentially support that work. So similar to what we've done in Taranaki, and I was there recently just, again, putting in the next milestone for some of the work they've done since oil and gas announcements were made. So they would have a good idea of the way that transition work has rolled out and would look to do the same in Southland.
Were you frustrated that you were prevented from spending $100 million or announcing $100 million?
Oh, so look, regardless of whether or not it's now or in 2 months' time, we are, of course, at the moment, along with the people of Southland, really looking for a timeline we can plan around, and we don't quite have that yet. Rio Tinto have said 14 months, but it may well be that it ends up being a bit longer. That then gives us something to really work with. The money that we were looking to put in, essentially, is the money that the government subsidises through the emissions trading scheme. So it makes good sense it goes into the community to support their ambition for future industry.
But I ask you mentioned Taranaki. I asked you the same question about Taranaki. I asked you the other week about Southland. I mean, nothing replaces what you've done. In oil and gas, opening a think tank doesn't provide the jobs that are being lost in oil and gas the same way $100 million doesn't replace the 1,000+ jobs at Tiwai, does it?
Well, firstly, that's not what's happened in Taranaki. The New Energy Development Centre is around commercialising alternatives to fossil fuels, which is the future for New Zealand and the future for the world. And again, it's actually the roadmap that we've been supporting has been generated by Taranaki themselves. These aren't the government's ideas, these are theirs. In Southland, Great South already have a number of initiatives that they've been pursuing as an economic development agency. What they're really looking for is just ongoing financial support to turn those into a reality. They've got initiatives around the future alternative protein sources being grown in the region, data centres, a number of other things that are actually real. They're not just concepts for them, and aquaculture, salmon farming.
This quarantine, when are we announcing whether or not we're going to be charging people $3,000 when they return to the country, and is it the Greens who are holding this up?
No, it's not. So I expect that we'll be doing that shortly. Of course, you'll understand why this is one of those things, of course, Mike, that if it's got affecting legislation, you need to get that all in order, and we need to make sure that we have a timeline so that we don't cause any rush if that indeed is a decision we make. So
Peter's told us on Friday that it wasn't him. He's keen. You're keen. The Greens aren't keen. So why aren't we already into it?
Again, you're just making a decision. It's simply you're making a call that it's about the decision. It's actually the practicalities of implementing something like this, the legislative footing for it. These things are always slightly more complicated than they seem, but it actually won't be too far away, I imagine, before.
This bloke Buchani, did he jump the queue?
Well, he did come in a legitimate way, and then, of course, once he made a claim for refugee status, that's not something we make a call over. That's decided separately through an immigration protection tribunal, so it's not a political decision, and nor should it be.
Golra's met him at the airport, for goodness sake. Did he come in a legitimate way
He's
with a view?
A decision maker within the government, and I do really, for the credibility of our system, again, it is not something that the government has involvement in.
No, but did he come in a legitimate way to the Writers' Festival with a view saying, well, now we're here, let's go for it, and look what happened? And meantime, there's a whole bunch of legitimate people stuck somewhere else in the world who didn't get a chance.
It is up to Immigration New Zealand to determine the credibility of those individual claims for coming into New Zealand, and they've done that, and it's not something I'm going to relitigate.
The hydro study that you announced over the weekend, don't we already know what we need to know, and that is that we'll get to 95%, and beyond that it becomes a little bit expensive, and so therefore if we know that, why do we need another $30 million study?
I think it would be wrong to say that this is just about hitting the 100%. This is also has the potential to make sure that we have a sustainable source of energy, a battery for New Zealand when our lake storage is down, when in our hydrological year we're not able to meet demand. And in doing so, it has the potential to bring down the cost of electricity in New Zealand as well. So it's not just about achieving 100% renewable electricity. It's also about actually what it does for the cost of electricity in New Zealand too.
All right, person travelled from New Zealand, has tested positive for COVID in South Korea. What do you know of that?
Yeah, so we've had, there's been one similar case before. In that case, it turned out to be a false positive. In this case, I'll be checking in with our health officials, but given, of course, the chance or likelihood that someone can, of course, pick something like this up in transit or travel, or the number of other factors, it's not something health officials have raised alarm bells with me about at this stage, but I will be following up on it this morning.
Appreciate your time as always. Jacinda Arden for a Monday morning.